What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to another video. Captain Cody Davis hanging out with you guys yet again for another one here. And we're going to be talking about my absolute favorite way to catch a bass in this one. We're going to be talking about flipping a jig, but more importantly, more specifically, I should say, we're going to be talking about what trailers I pick to put on the back of my flipping jigs this time of year while fishing on Lake Okeechobee or really anywhere in the state of Florida. This is a question I get a lot. I get asked a lot, but I've been getting, a lot of messages on Instagram and Facebook asking this very thing. Like, I know it's jig season. I know people are catching big fish on jigs. What trailer do I need to have on the back of my jig? And so I figured I'd just shoot this video and go over what I use. First and foremost, we'll just kind of talk about the jig real quick. Again, like I already said, everyone knows this is my favorite way to catch a bass. It's old school. It's manly. I feel like I need a pack of cigarettes in my pocket to even use this technique. There's been more big bass caught on a jig than anything else combined. It's close quarters fishing. It's big line, big rods, big hook sets, boat flips. It's everything bass fishing should be. And although watching an 8-pounder eat a frog or seeing getting that bump on a worm, dragging it deep, there's nothing that beats flipping a jig in Florida in the spring and summertime for catching big ones. It's just, I love it. I absolutely love it. But I feel like there's a lot of people that are almost intimidated by this technique. They don't have confidence in it. Not sure if they're doing it right. But here's the deal. This is probably the most simple technique in the world of bass fishing. A lot of people just overthink it. And we'll kind of just get into this real quick. So this is the jig that I flip, I'm going to say 90% of the time down here in Florida. This is the Gambler Jigzilla. Okay. I don't even know if they're running them in full production right now. I've got like a lifetime supply or a couple years supply. So we'll have to see what happens if they aren't making them anymore. But this is the one I use. But listen, use what works for you. Use a jig that you look at, you have confidence in. Use a jig that when you flip, maybe you're not getting hung. You like the way it looks. You like the way it falls. It's all about confidence in this. This is the Gambler Jigzilla. Gambler also makes a very popular one called the Ninja Jig. You've got the Florida standard jig down here is the Medlock double weed guard flipping jig. I mean, everyone knows about that jig. It catches absolute giants. You got the Strike King Hack Attack jig. You've got the dirty jigs, no jack flipping jig. You got the punch. I mean, there's so many good flipping jigs out there. Just play with them and use what works for you. This is what works for me. So I love this jig. It's got a beast of a hook on it. I love the head shape. I love the profile the jig gives out. That's what I like. Whether I'm using this jig, another jig, a swim jig, I always put Gambler Star Flash skirts on all of my jigs. Rounded strands give the bait a bigger profile. They also have some sprayed laminate inside of them as well. I don't know if you guys can see that twinkle right there. Does that make a difference? I don't know. I think it looks cool, so it gives me confidence. Another big thing is with flat strands on your jig, they have typically what they'll do is they'll tend to stick to your trailer when the jig's flipping, and it kind of makes that profile a little smaller. Could make it fall faster, could get you a few more bites at times, but this time of year I'm looking for that bulky big profile. So these rounded strands do a good job of not sticking to your trailer. Okay. So that's why I like them. I don't know, gives me confidence. I like these. So most of the time people are flipping black and blue. I like to be a little different. I use June bug. Does it matter? Probably not at all. Val, if you're watching this, if you can make me a black one, a black Star Flash skirt with silver flake, I'd love you forever. So just throwing that out there. But anyway, I use a June bug skirt 99% of the time. If I ran out and had to flip black and blue, that's absolutely fine. I don't think it really matters. 1 ounce and a 3/4 ounce. That's all I have. Half ounce is a little too light for me. I don't like it. And 1 1/4 ounce is just, I don't ever have a purpose for it. If I have to go up that high, I'm just going to flip a regular Texas rig. So these are the two that I use. Now, I'm saying a 1/2 ounce doesn't work. Probably the best jig flipper on Okeechobee, Gary Milicevic. All he does exclusively flips a half-ounce medlock jig. Again, use what works for you. But these are what work for me. So I got a 1 ounce and a 3/4. I'm probably going to flip the 3/4 ounce 75 to 80% of the time. Reasons I would flip a 1 ounce. If we were dealing with very windy conditions, all right, I could be a little more accurate. If I make a side flip and the wind's blowing a bow in my line, this is still going to fall a little more true. If I'm flipping some thicker grass, some laid over Kissimmee grass and things like that, this 1 ounce is what I'm going to pick up. But typically when I'm just going out to flip a jig, I'm flipping to the edge of grass. I'm laying it in some sparse cattails, sparse reeds. So this 3/4 ounce is usually going to get it done. So now that that's over, trailers. We're going to start with this one. So we're talking about flipping down here in Florida. One thing we have a lot of down here in Florida are man-made canals. Whether we're down here on Alligator Alley, out in the canal systems of Everglades Holiday Park, wherever, all down in the glades down here, or any residential canals. A lot of times these canals are dug just pretty much straight. Just not a gradual drop at all. It'll just you'll have a little shelf up on the bank and then it plummets down, whether the bottom is in 5 foot of water or 10. Either way, it's a sharp drop. And, a thing a lot of these fish do in these canals is they'll suspend on that drop. So there's days you can catch them on a spook, you can catch them on a jerkbait, but a great technique to how I catch a lot of my fish in the glades, and some of my biggest ones I've ever caught, is I'll take this 1 ounce or a 3/4 ounce, but a lot of times it's a 1 ounce flipping jig, and I'll put a Gambler burner crawl on the back of it. This is like a speed craw style bait, great for punching mats and what have you, but it's got those, I don't know, sharply cut swimming, you guys can see that there, appendages, which I typically don't like on a jig, and we'll get into that. But what I'll do is I'll be paralleling the bank. Usually if I have a partner, he or she will be flipping the bank, up shallow, and I'll literally take this bait and flip it 15 feet out in front of my boat and just let that thing plummet to the bottom. Just fall straight down. And I call it playing catch. The amount of bites you get with doing that, fishing for those what are suspended fish that are down 4 feet under the surface, is crazy. This thing falls by their face and they will rush down and grab it before it even hits the bottom. Your landing percentage is like 99.999% because you got that big hook in there. You reel down, you whack them with 65-pound braid in open water. They're coming in the boat. Don't even wait for the net. You boat flip them. And I like this type of trailer because it has a lot of that action and it just swims. It's a narrow bait, doesn't have a lot of drag. So the only thing moving on this whole bait are just these little kickers. And it draws me a lot of bites. So I use that quite a bit. All right. But other than that, that's typically the only time I use a trailer with a lot of action on the back of my flipping jig. These right here, I got 4 trailers here. These are legitimately the only trailers I ever flip on the back of a jig on Okeechobee, and probably ever have. All right. So we'll kind of run through them. The first one here, most of you watching this have probably used this bait on the back of a jig. We got a Gambler Mega Daddy. It's just an oversized craw trailer. You can see those huge craw appendages on there. It's a very big profiled bait, but a very subtle action, which is what most of these trailers have in common. It's a very flat bait, so it kind of drags the water, catches a lot of water, helps the bait kind of slow down. Just gives it a big profile. Next, we've got the Gambler Ugly Otter. Okay, this bait's been around since God was a boy. There was a classic one on this bait. It's very different. It's a great bait. It's a great jig trailer. Probably the biggest. I'm going to say my 2 biggest fish I've ever caught on a jig have come with this on the back of it. And now I just realized that. This one is a Missile Baits D-Bomb. You guys see me flip this a lot out here on Okeechobee. It works awesome on the back of a jig as well. It's just basically like an oversized jig chunk. Fits on a jig great. Again, very subtle appendages there, but gets a lot of big bites. And then here, You've got a very similar bait, just overly sized. This is the Gambler Stinger. Okay, and you can see this is a 5.25 inch bait. And I use this guy quite a bit out here as well. So what you guys can tell is none of these baits have any crazy appendages. They don't throw off a lot of water. They don't move a lot of water. They don't have a lot of action. That's what I like. I don't want that when I'm flipping a jig in reeds, in cattails. What you're trying to imitate with this technique is you're trying to make this just look like a big bluegill panfish that messed up and got too close. These big bass this time of year, which is why this technique excels this time of year in the hotter months of the year. You'll have these giant fish that are pushed up shallow around brim beds, around tilapia beds, and they're essentially just sitting and waiting for one of these baits to mess up. And they're looking to eat one time a day, and make it count. They're looking for a big meal, inhale a bluegill, and just kind of stroll back out and digest, and then do the same thing tomorrow. So you're trying that bigger profile is literally going to get you more bites and bigger bites this time of year. So that's what we try to do. If I'm flipping, let's just say Kissimmee grass. We're kind of in a hay field. We're in a big field of grass where I'm making just random flips or trying to make as many flips as I can. A lot of times that's when I'm going to go to like just a standard style bait, all right, or size bait, the D-bomb or the otter. When I'm making a lot of flips just in a very productive area, it's still a big profile. It's still a bluegill profile. It's still subtle, but it's just, I don't know. I mean, it's going to go in and out of if you're trying to lay it into a little laid over Kissimmee grass or something, this bait's going to fall through there with ease and not get hung up. It's not going to hinder the fall of the bait. Whereas if I'm flipping the outside edge of the main lake, maybe I'm flipping a little bit dirtier water, or if I'm flipping just isolated targets, okay, like round bushels of Kissimmee grass that are isolated, just stalks of cattails that are just every so feet apart, individual clumps of buggy whips, which is what I usually do out here with a jig. That's when I'll bump it up to this bigger profile bait. Again, dirtier water, they could see it more. They're up there looking for a big meal anyway. This is going to trigger a bigger bite if you get it in front of them. It looks sexy in the water. And you don't have to worry about your bait, this getting hung on anything and hindering the fall of the bait. You're flipping it right to the edge, or if you are flipping it up inside the reeds, a lot of times the reeds might be a little more sparse. There's more room in there. If I am trying to put it anywhere that's tight, in the tight buggy whips or cattails, then I'll usually try to go to a smaller bait. There's nothing worse than making the perfect flip, but this gets caught on a reed and then you're jiggling it, you get hung, and you just mess up your presentation. So that's one thing I will tell you with this technique. Presentation is key. It's everything. These fish are usually shallow. The time that this jig excels is when you're sweating, you're chugging a bottle of water every 10 minutes. It's miserable outside. There's no wind. You got chizzywinks and gnats all in your face. That's when they're eating this. So it's usually quiet. It's slick, calm. You want to be real proficient, very what's the word I'm looking for? Efficient with making your flips, making them quiet, and putting this bait right where you think that fish is. You're essentially trying to hit them in the face. So if you're in more sparse cover, go with the bigger profile if you can get away with it. If you're a little tighter, go with stuff like this. With like something like this Mega Daddy here, or even the Stinger, typically what I do is they're very similar sized baits. A lot of times with the Mega Daddy, I'll just cut kind of, you can see it's got like this teardrop shape, and then it's got some ribs. I'll go to the second rib and cut that. And then with the Stinger, I'll usually go down 3 or 4 notches here. Same thing, cut that off. And I don't have to show you guys how to rig. It's dark in here. I messed this up so bad I cannot see. I think that don't look too bad. I mean, that'll do her right there. All right. You could see this is a big profile. These are not going to throw a lot of water. It's going to be subtle, but that thing's just going to just glide straight down. Here's the deal. I'm not looking to get activity out of this bait or action out of this bait. I'm not looking to give the bait action. A lot of you might look at it and say, oh, well, he's probably going to Alabama shake it back to the boat. Not the case at all. It's literally flip it to the target. The most important thing is that you do not do anything to this bait on the way down. You don't hinder the fall. And that also means you don't want to feel anything. You guys will see me in my videos. I will flip, and as the bait's going to the target, I'm also bringing my rod back in free spool. And when that bait hits the water, I'm pointing the rod right at it. And what I'm doing when I'm bringing the rod back is I'm throwing slack into that line so that when this bait hits the water, everything it does after that is on its own. All right. The only thing hindering this fall is the drag from the 65-pound braid in the water. I don't want to feel it going to the bottom. I don't want the wind getting the line tight and making the bait slow down and fall or start kind of turning. You want this thing to fall straight down. And that's the key. That's the action. That's what gets you the bite. All right. Once the bait's on the bottom, hits the bottom, I'm watching the line. I'm watching to see if I see the reeds move when the bait goes in. I'm watching to see if I see my line going off. Even though my bait's in free spool, the technology in these rods, reels, line anymore is so great. A lot of times you will feel a fish pick it up even on a slack line. I'll reel my slack out. Big tip I can give you guys when jig fishing, if you're new to it, when you flip the jig in there, it hits the bottom, you engage the reel and go to reel. Lift your rod like you already know there's a bass on there. If you go to lift and it's somewhat heavy, swing. All right, nothing laid on top of that jig and is holding it down. He's got it in one place and it's in its mouth. All right, so swing the rod, set the hook, reel the fish, and flip him in the boat. If you lift and there isn't any weight, more times than not, I'm just turning the handle and kind of swimming it back to the boat. 99% of your bites are going to come on that initial drop. So presenting the bait quietly, presenting it perfectly right where you want it to be, and then not hindering that fall, that's it. That's the presentation. That's the action on the jig. I don't know. That's about it. I mean, it's very simple. A lot of people overthink it. I guess I can rig. I mean, I could put this guy on here for you real quick. All right. So there's your Mega Daddy on the back of a jig. That one, I don't know how I did that perfect. That is, I want to eat that. That is exactly what you're looking for right there. I didn't trim this one. You don't have to. Let's trim it. What the heck? You guys still with me here? Give her a haircut here. I mean, come on, man. That's the deal. Again, you don't want it to look anything like a crawfish. You just want this to look like these fish are up there targeting brim, targeting bluegill. That is one cool thing I'll tell you too, if you're new to this. The bigger profiled trailer like this Stinger or this Mega Daddy, it's going to hinder the fall of the bait. I know I just told you don't want to do that, but it's going to hinder it in a natural way. The bigger the plastic on the back, the slower your jig's going to fall. So sometimes if they're liking that faster drop, it seems like, but I'm fishing for bigger fish, then sometimes I'll go to a 1 ounce and put the big Stinger, a big plastic on the back. See what I'm saying? Because it's going to fall faster, but still going to have that big profile. The other thing is, because these baits are these bigger baits, really all of these are bigger and they're more of like a flatter profile as well. They're going to land on the water, not as much of a douche when this bait hits the water. It'll land softer. You can just kind of lay it in there a lot easier. But that's it. I don't know. I was still trying to ramble, but I guess I don't got to say anything else. Those are literally the 5 trailers I use. The burner crawl is a great bait, but if we were fishing deeper water, if Okeechobee, if we were flipping in 10, 11 foot, then yes, maybe this so it kicks on the way down. But where this technique really excels is when we're flipping in 3 foot of water or less, and 3 feet's even a little bit deep. So those fish don't have time to see that kicking action anyway. You just want that good profile, that brim profile on the way down. And these guys here do a great job, but these are probably my two favorites right here. So check these out. Go give flipping a jig a try this summer. The days where you don't want to go fishing because it's so godly hot outside, uncomfortable, that's where this excels without a doubt. And you'll definitely put some of the biggest fish you'll ever catch in the boat doing this if you give it the time of day. Have confidence and make yourself do it. The best way to do it is go out there, bring 2 rods, bring 1 jig rod and another one with a jig on it, and go out there and learn the technique. And it's a lot of fun, catches a lot of big ones, and your landing percentage goes way, way up with this. So that's about it. I appreciate you guys watching. Sorry this one went a little bit long. If you guys have any questions, leave it in the comments. I'll be sure to read it, and I will see you guys on the next one. Tight lines.